Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Starro Podcast. I'm your host, Starro. Before we dive into today's topic, I just want to give you guys a brief introduction. So, yes, I'm Starro, and I'm starting this podcast just to let you guys in on what this is about. This podcast is just going to be an insightful podcast where I'll be including guests. I will be having great conversations, but in the meantime, I'm going to have to set that up. So, before I get any guests, I'm just going to be having conversations about things that I think are relevant to society that, quite frankly, I just think they need to be discussed. And even though I'm speaking to you, hopefully these conversations can spark some thought in your head and cause you to have meaningful conversations with those you care about or those who are around you. Just stay tuned, and I can't wait to be on this journey with you guys. I have some surprises also along the way, but as I said, those are surprises, so I can't tell you in order to keep the surprise. But stay tuned, and I look forward to starting today's episode. So apparently, according to Harvard Kennedy School, the percentage of U.S. adults reporting no close friends has quadrupled since 1990. That's a pretty big deal. Friends are a natural part of life. That's how human beings socialize. That's, something that I think people crave for. They want social longing. Now, today's topic is going to be based on the friendship recession. And a friendship recession, it kind of sounds like what it is, but I'm going to give you guys a definition because, of course, clarity is important here. So the term was coined by Daniel Cox, and it refers to the decline in the number of close friends people have, leading to increased feelings of loneliness and social isolation. So, I've noticed in our society, there's been a huge push for mental health, right? Mental health has been a recurring theme for the past decade or so. And while it has its benefits, it does have its drawbacks, but that's another talk for a different time. But I do feel like the friendship recession is intertwined with this. Social isolation can cause some of the, worst to come out in people. And maybe the best for those rare kinds of people. But, as we know, for instance, people go to prison, they're in solitary confinement, and usually that doesn't do a positive effect on them. They end up becoming a little bit worse off. And it's quite possible that people may be feeling those same environments, but not being behind bars. But anyways, let's continue with the discussion. I would also like to add, too, that we live in a society that really pushes connection. I think everybody wants the connection. Some people call it different stuff. They're like, I want the magic connection, or I want the right connection, or I need the personal connection, the romantic connection. I mean, they need the Ethernet cable connection. They need every kind of connection there is in the world. But regardless of what people may call it, everybody is longing for the connection. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people are longing for a connection, right? Because we do have those people who are connected and they're not looking for any more connection. As we have all these electronics, we're always like connecting everything to the wall and whatnot. So anyways, let me disconnect and continue on in the topic. I'm going to dive into a few points as to why I think this is occurring. And these are going to be kind of anecdotal. Some may be backed by research, but I'm going to do my best to be concise about it. Let's start from childhood days, right? Remember when we were children? I'm somebody who is kind of in the middle of millennial and Gen Z. I know for the fact, for millennials, I know for my stage of childhood development, and I know for, anybody above millennials, your childhood was rallied around with, other kids who you met because you had to go outside and play. We didn't have a lot of technology as much as this generation does. So I feel like our society was built around the idea that you filled up all the free time you have with meeting people. Now, meeting people is an organic way to make friends. In many other phases of life, we found out we met people through school, maybe through college. And also, too, with that being said, the emphasis on recreational activities was also big. We noticed that there's a lot less community centers. There's a lot less public spaces, just casual places where people would interact. That's kind of died down a bit, especially thanks to a lot of, the e-commerce business that we have now, a lot of delivery platforms, a lot of places that you used to have to sit and wait to get your food. You can now get it delivered to your door. And again, a lot of the things have their benefits, but these are some of the drawbacks. Ultimately, the little simple things that we take for granted would usually lead us into social interactions that we used to have that we just quite often don't frequent anymore. There's also, considering the technological improvements in our society, we've had people who've also preferred to have online only relationships, which, they have their benefits, but, they kind of rob people of the deep in-person connection that you would usually have. It's more of a passive interaction. Percent of Americans have online only friends nowadays. So that's a very different perspective. Back then, your friends were limited to the people you went to school with, the people you went to work with, the people you went to church with, the people who played in your sports teams, or people who lived in your neighborhood. But now we've been open to this whole World Wide Web. I remember the closest thing that we had to an online friend was a pen pal. And I mean, I'm kind of young for that, but I remember they forced us to do it in elementary school. But it's interesting to see how nowadays people kind of are more leaning towards the online connection. And, we also are a little bit more disciplined as a society in a sense. When I mean discipline, I mean, I think a lot of people have found benefits in having a routine lifestyle, right? Getting up at the same time, going to the same place at the same day, doing things in a way where it creates consistency, reliability. But, ultimately, as I said, even though it has its pros, the cons are is that you will be missing out on interactions that you probably would have gotten if you were to make a few changes. Now, I'm not telling you to change your lifestyle because, only you can live your life and I got to live my life. But, I just have to bring up these things because, again, it's usually the little things that change that make a big difference for us. And I know for some people this may not be a pressing issue because, quite frankly, some people are introverted. And I think for the first time in our society, we've seen a shift towards introversion a little bit more. And the people who are introverted might be excelling in this sort of dynamic, whereas they didn't before, simply because, we have a lot more remote jobs. We're going to more of a gig economy, which means people will be working less with others and working from home. And that also makes a big difference, not going to the office and seeing people, that's definitely going to, rob you of that interaction. And what I would recommend is that if you're having a remote job and if you want to make more friends, you're definitely going to have to be more intentional about going out, using those apps, the meetups, all that other stuff. But even then, the cost that this really drives in me is that there will be a health worry because the truth is, lack of friendships, lack of relationships can lead to health, stress, heart disease, dementia. A lot of things are prone to people not having those proper connections because, again, we are social creatures, regardless of what people say. It's just that some of us go about it differently. And being withdrawn from communication can be very, very suffocating. And especially when it comes to, like, I guess if you want to make it a gender issue, men are more wired to be more independent. So especially worse, we live in a world where there's less interaction. More men are always going to be prone to wanting to pull in, I guess, as instead of women maybe wanting to reach out more. So, we definitely seen a lot more men have less friends these days. But again, some people are worried about it, whereas others won't be. When I thought about it, I said to myself, I look back on the older generations and I was thinking to myself, like my grandparents, they had a number of friends that they could remember off the top of their head. Uncles, aunts, things like that. Whereas I noticed with my generation, our friends don't really seem to be as constant in our lives. And what I mean by that is people are kind of more focused on the task at hand, maybe work or maybe, social hierarchy or social accomplishment. So there seems to be less commitment to the idea of investing in a person and investing in an outcome of being around a person. As they say, you are the accumulation of who you hang out with. And I think that has kind of gotten in the way of how we treat our friendships because people might be posing as friends, not in a, how would I say, a evil way, but maybe more in a disingenuous way. Maybe they just need to get something out of that interaction. Once the two of you have, well, hopefully, if the two of you reach the desired outcome, that friendship may dissipate and then they'll move on to the next person. I think it has definitely become more of a hierarchy, wanting to get to where you want to be in life. And maybe the older generations probably prioritize more of, I want to know who this person is and see them through to the end, just as far as helping them become a better person or they help me become a better person or pouring into other people's lives. So, that's just how it goes. But at the end of the day, the reason why I'm making this video is for the people who don't feel like they have enough friends, you're not alone. Um, and I'm not trying to make that a reflection of me. I'm just saying I've seen a lot of people who are concerned with not having as many friends as they think they need. Um, and it's okay. You're not alone. I think a lot of the times people don't want to be vulnerable. And sometimes you just have to reach out to other people. And, the best ways to go about doing that would be to, find those places where you're not going to, restaurants you haven't been to, clubs that you probably never thought about joining, even traveling to cities, places you've never been to. Open the world and look outside. Look at people for who they are, not behind a phone screen, and say something to them with your actual words, with your actual mouth, not a digital way, and just try to meet them where they are. Meet them where they are and see what can come out of it, because you'd be surprised to know how much people would appreciate a genuine connection from somebody else. And honestly, with this podcast, that's my goal, is I want to create a genuine connection with my audience. Now, I apologize, this is my first video, first time on camera, so it's a little uncomfortable for me. But I have no problem wanting to reach out and, continue to practice, I guess, my interaction skills. Because usually my day-to-day work, I usually tend to be a people-facing person, but being a camera-facing person is a little awkward for me and out of place. But as the time changes, so do I. So this is more where the world is headed, and I guess I'm on board right now. But take things slowly but surely, and be steady, and always be careful. So thank you guys for listening. My name is Starro. I can't wait to speak with you guys on the next episode. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, or talk to other people. All right. Have a great day, guys.